Hello, and welcome to the show. This is the Goodwind podcast, and I'm Niko. And I want to be pretty vulnerable here to start off. Don't have the gumption to ease your mind with some attempted comedy. And it's good, though. It's good stuff. I've been really trying to manifest, if you will, or just call in respect and understanding, particularly in the form of friendship. And the good news is I've really felt that today. I've felt both respected, heard, and understood through friendship, where I was in that vulnerable kind of place where, without getting too specific, there was an event that's being coordinated, which I was invited to, and it's part of a group that I've hosted parties for in the past, and it's pretty excited about it. It's like it has the lookings of being a really good time. And later on, there was another person added to the group who I've had personal conflict with recently. And that's usually it's never been a big deal in the past, right? I've kind of had no problems with, either going and maybe pretending like I wasn't feeling awkward or I wasn't feeling uncomfortable, or just choosing not to go and kind of surrendering that. But this time was a little bit different. This time I reached out to the event coordinators and told them the discomfort that I've had with this person. And in this example, I've built the bridge, if you will, multiple times since the conflict arose. I've been the one to reach out. Let's say 2 or 3 months ago the conflict arose. I've been the one to reach out multiple times. I even tried to invite. I host men's groups, and which is like a good place to kind of, for men to get together and have a space to talk and to be heard and to listen. And it's actually a good place to kind of get conflict out and to create resolution. And so I invited this person to do that, to create resolution. And they weren't able to make it, or they didn't want to. And since then, I've reached out a few times, not always with the most passive mind, because what I'm now understanding more is violence is an act of desperation, not just physical violence, but someone who doesn't feel heard, someone who doesn't feel seen, is way more likely to commit acts of mental or physical violence. So if I'm reaching out and trying to create resolution, and the person stonewalls me, turns their back, walks away from a conversation, like I feel that fire. I feel that it's almost like a jaguar. Like, you don't turn your back on a jaguar; they'll pounce on you. Not that I'm a jaguar, but it's the instinct to pounce when someone like tries to turn their back on you, and resisting that, of course, and not pouncing, but feeling like sad and like. So I've gone out of my way to kind of try to create resolution, only to be stonewalled. So when I've reached out a few times, it hasn't been nice. In fact, one of the times I reached out, I was like, invited them to jiu-jitsu. Now, this person doesn't do jiu-jitsu. I do. I have the advantage, right? I tend to use jiu-jitsu as a form of play and communication. And for what it's worth, coming from me, it's not a game of domination, although it can be for some. It's very much felt when someone is very, very much enthralled with winning and the domination element. And I've gone there sometimes, particularly if someone like hurts me, like during a match. That fire can build up, and I'll turn it on. I'll take it personal, right? And go for it. So I invited them to jiu-jitsu kind of out of anger, kind of like, okay, if you think you can ignore me, or you think you can send me mental attacks, if you think you can talk about me behind my back and defame me, and attack me that way, a non-physical way, then allow me to show you what a physical attack is. Because for me, especially with relationships man to man, if you're going to sit across a room and throw judgments at me, if you're going to make comments to cut and poke at me, but as long as you're not, looking at me while you're doing it, avoiding eye contact, or crossing that physical barrier, you think that's allowed, I'm not willing to put up with that anymore. And I much prefer a good old physical scrap, man to man, than someone who's trying to play mental games and have the subtle attacks. It's much more. It's like, maybe because I'm not as good as at the mental games. Maybe that has something to do with it, or maybe because I'm physically able and I practice. I've said in previous episodes, I communicate best through dance. I communicate best through physical touch. And I do think there's a lot of, my ultimate form of conflict resolution is play. And to be able to play with a particular amount of physicality through touch, through a little bit of wrestling, or even roughhousing. Like, there's a valid place for roughhousing in my life. And I think for men particularly, I don't necessarily even have to gender, but there's a certain fire in men, a certain territorial essence, and I think there can be a lot of resolution in grappling, in playing, in roughhousing, especially when at the end there's like a bow of respect, or you slap hands. If it doesn't cross the particular aggression line, it can be really rewarding, really healing. Like, grounding, humbling, and that humility has been really a key ingredient in developing closer man-to-man relationships. So some of the messages I sent, some of the ways I've reached out after being rejected, after creating a bridge, and waiting for the person to walk over or meet me halfway on. And like, okay, let's, I knew they weren't going to, but they weren't brave enough or committed enough to renew the relationship, to actually show up for something like that. So that's another way I've reached out, but it's been all me kind of reaching out. And eventually there's just been a piece. What's been beautiful about this is kind of the space that this relationship, this breakup, if you will, has created, has already been validated and vindicated. There's been energy and people that have filled this space that has, like, it's made it worth it. I talked about this on the TP episode. Like, there was a moment, or like a collection of moments, where I was able to drop resentments that I'd been kind of carrying, particularly this past year or two, and able to pray for people regardless of our history. So there is peace around this. And even though there's peace, and I wish this person and any person that I've had harbored resentments, I've wished them well and even pictured them living a great light. Sometimes I'll use techniques where I'll imagine like green, gold, any color light encompassing my body, ridding myself of impurities, or like shadow, pulling it out, and then like sending into the ether, and then renewing me with this golden green light. It's just like a visual imagination technique that I use to kind of create a physical, emotional response during my prayers. And then I'll send that to them and do the same on them, and go through multiple people or whatever. But even though this peace exists, even though I wish for them the best, and I don't need anything from them, don't need a particular sorry, or I still have to maintain a boundary to not put myself back in a place that I'll just feed back into the cycle. And so, in a way, I still have wants and needs, and there is something that, like, the resolution isn't perfect. It's not all hunky-dory. It's not completely healed, maybe, if you still have to have boundaries. So that's a question I have. It's like, if I still have boundaries, is the healing there, or is there more work to be done? Like, nature seems to not need... It seems to be, I don't know, there's structure in nature, right? Things are composed of hexagons and what have you, carbon. And there seems to be a structure. But like, when you look at an atom like carbon, we'll look at like the Bohr's model, which there's a nucleus in the center, and then there's rings around. There's 2 electrons in the nearest ring, and then there's 4 in the second ring for carbon. But more realistically, electrons come in a cloud, where they're kind of appearing and reappearing at different points a certain distance away from the nucleus, which seems to be more solid. So I guess the structure lies in the nucleus. This is kind of a tangent, but So maintaining boundaries and also being healed. And I am open, or at least I'm saying I'm open. I do feel quite closed off to this relationship because it seems to be better without, although we still run in similar circles. So a complete clean break doesn't seem possible, and it's actually not even, it doesn't seem possible. So I out of necessity, I'm remaining open to there being healing, or I guess a friendship that still can be recultivated. But that would require, in this particular instance, for effort to be made, and it's not on my side. Now, sometimes I've used cold shoulder. Sometimes I've walked away from conversations. So karmically, it's not that I completely don't understand. I mean, in this particular relationship, I haven't done that, though. In fact, I've been the one to kind of give a little bit more. And that's on statistics. Like, look, you don't keep score in a relationship. It's never healthy to keep score until it is. You never want to give with the expectation of receiving something in return. But after a while, after some long times, occasionally you reflect and look back. And I've looked back on this particular relationship, and it's like, oh, there's physical evidence, money, relationships, opportunity, promoting their work, helping them physically with labor, unpaid labor, to set up their projects, so hours spent. Something as simple as the amount of the ratio in which you go to someone's house or they make the effort to come to you, so hours driven. And it's just been, when you look back after long enough and it's grossly disproportionate, and that anger at yourself for kind of spreading yourself thin, making yourself small, is real. And eventually you kind of, I guess I've come into a certain sense of sovereignty, self-esteem, self-worth, self-respect, where it's like, oh, there are people that will genuinely want me around. There are people that won't have such a hard time creating a reciprocal, symbiotic nature in a relationship with me. And I think if someone's not able to create some sort of reciprocation, symbiosis, then it's best to create that space, create that boundary. So when an event comes up that I've been part of the group and been contributing to the group through whatever hosting or participating, and then this person which you've created a boundary for comes up, in this case I reached out. I said, you know what, I do have a boundary there, and I know it's not my event, but I'd appreciate it if you reconsidered this or considered me and how I feel, because I won't be comfortable. I won't be able to show up fully. There's been no resolution. So I'll basically go to the event and feel those microaggressions, those passive aggressive things, and be uncomfortable. And I'm pretty sure no one wants that, because when I'm uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable. And I don't think it's just within me. I think when we're with other people, like, it's felt. And I hang out with like sensitive, caring people, so like they'll probably feel a little bit of picking up what I'm putting down. And a beautiful thing happened when I was able to express this boundary, or this, I guess, vulnerability, because it's, there's that doubt that comes in. Well, who am I to uninvite someone to an event? All those old patterns of, shouldn't I just work on this myself? And yeah, there's a bunch of self-reflection involved, but I can no longer bear the entire weight of discord in any relationship I have. There is in any relationship, there are one or two or more people involved. And for a person to bear the entirety of any discord, because the other person, and when you bring criticism or share how you feel, they say, oh, you're just projecting onto me. I'm not actually like that. You're just projecting. And when you say, no, this is something I've observed in you for 10 years, and they say, I'm done, and they just walk away, well, I'm not going to bear that anymore. It's not my job to do anyone's work for them. And when it is, because sometimes I'm happy to help people do work, part of the reason I'm making this podcast is in an effort to help people illuminate themselves. I'm not taking on anyone's work in particular, so maybe it's not a perfect example, but the idea is some of the work that I'm doing, I'm hoping is reflected so that the path for an individual might be a little bit easier for them. Maybe. And if I was a wise man, I'd climb to the top of the mountain peak and think about strength versus weak. I'd find a couple feet that rests. I'd find a spot that rests a couple feet above your head and figure out how I could help you reach it. Atmosphere. So, yeah, relationships aren't all rainbows and butterflies, even if you're in a very self-aware community. And I'm kind of going through this place of expressing boundaries, but the beautiful thing that happened is I expressed them, and instead of all those doubts in my mind that who am I and what am I worth to this community, they were met with understanding and respect, and the facilitators were like, you know what, we've been in your shoes where we felt uncomfortable or we weren't able to show up fully to an event because someone has wronged us or we've perceived that they've wronged us. And whatever boundaries you have or you want to put up, we support you in that. When I got those messages back, I almost melted into a puddle. Because these prayers of asking for understanding in community, within friendships, for respect that maybe I've given in excess, because there seems to be a fine line in me in the respect I'm giving to making myself small, like over humility to the point of self-degradation. So to express that and for it to be welcomed, and a side note is like, it didn't even take them like a day to get back to me. It didn't take them multiple days. They didn't need to reflect on it. They were able to kind of receive the message and respond. And the timeliness of it too, although it's not the most important element, was really important to me. Like, it's just like the fact that there was like a lack of hesitation. It's like when you say I love you to someone and you're really feeling it, and without hesitation they say I love you back. And it's like, that's so wonderful, because when the hesitation is there, it's like, it can be. That might be giving with the expectation of receiving. Most recently, I'll say I love you and just kind of put that out there. And how I practice that in reverse is when someone says I love you to me and I'm not and even if there's a moment of hesitation, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll wait till another time to say it back, because it's not fully authentic. I'm gonna give them words built on sand, on a foundation of sand or whatever. Even though I may really love them, in that moment I'm caught up in something, and so it's just because someone says I love you, I don't have to say I love you back, at least immediately. And you certainly don't have to. It kind of reminds me of there's this thing happening in polite culture right now where Thank yous are met with thank yous. There's a shortage of your welcomes out there. And I think this is a nice little symbol for something that's a pretty serious issue, and that's people's inability to accept. It almost feels like when I say thank you and someone says thank you back, I'm giving you a gift of gratitude. Giving and receiving seems to be able to be replaced, because usually you receive something and then thank you so much. I feel the gratitude and I'm able to express it. Thank you. And for someone to say, no, thank you, it's almost like a deflection. It's not like a non-absorption of the gratitude that I'm able to give back. It's not being able to accept the love back. And there's a really strong argument in my mind. If you're not able to receive, are you fully able to give? If things become their opposites in their deepest state, if you're only if things are bound to their opposites, like superiority and inferiority, then I think you can only give something with your heart as much as you're willing to receive something as your heart. And this is probably not very new. Maybe just a reminder. So the thank you culture is kind of like a small stance I have. And I think it's a really simple exercise to say you're welcome when someone says thank you. And, be a little bit different. Be a rebel with a cause. And the cause is to teach people how to receive by example. So literally whenever someone says thank you, and it's a lot, we kind of it's not that it's watered down. I'm sure people are practicing gratitude as best they can. And it's like, this is not to tear that down, because you could be practicing other things. But meeting every thank you with a you're welcome. And sometimes he'll say thank you, I'll be like, you're welcome. And they'll almost be taken aback. It's so unusual. Or they may have been expecting a thank you. And even some other times it's thank you, you're welcome, and thank you so much, and thank you. The game begins again. Thank you, you're welcome, and thank you. Or not, thank you, and you're welcome. You know what? You're welcome, because I didn't have to do this. I didn't have to drive 2 hours to your gathering. I didn't have to leave my house today. I didn't have to pick up the phone and call you, even though you might not answer, even though it might be uncomfortable and we haven't talked too much on the phone. And what are we even going to talk about? And how are we going to say goodbye? And I hope you don't, I kind of like you more than just a friend, so I hope you don't pick, if I talk, I expose myself, and so I'm not ready to tell you how I really feel about you. So you know what? You're welcome for putting all those doubts aside and doing it anyway. For thinking about me even for a moment, and then actually acting from that thoughtfulness. You're welcome for that. That's not guaranteed. I don't owe you anything. I'm out here literally surviving, trying my best. Now some days I'm thriving, but yeah, I'm keeping myself afloat. So the fact that I'm treading water and still able to, pass you your sippy cup of juice, you're welcome. a genuine "you're welcome," because I'm thinking of that Moana song that Maui sings, "You're welcome," where he's kind of assuming gratitude. But I think in a thank you rich, "you're welcome" deficient world, that song even is timely. I think the lesson nowadays might be learning how to receive, because I think even at the baseline of life, a lot of us have more than we're even comfortable with. Oops. I think a lot of us now. I've been particularly blessed or privileged. I haven't been trying to hide that at all. But what that meant for me as a child was a rejection of all things perceived privilege. For some reason, I had this early onset shame where I would get a new pair of shoes, right? And I would take them outside and drag them through the grass and the mud and try to scuff them intentionally. Because the shame of having something new, when I hung out with friends who, didn't get to have new shoes every school year, and that shame for me was really palpable. And I don't know, I wonder where that came from. I guess it was like not feeling worthy, low self-esteem type of thing. So I've actually had to overcome that. So my personal journey has required learning how to receive genuinely. And sex helped me, learn this a lot too. Getting head or something and needing to feel like I'm also pleasing the other person with whatever, trying to touch their vagina or penis, vulva, balls, whatever it is. And that's a disservice to myself, but also to them. Like, for them to, giving head can be vulnerable, I suppose. I've never really had problems with it, but it could probably feel a certain way. So if you're not able to kind of receive that humbling gift, if you're not able to humble yourself to receive as much as that person's humbling themselves to give, it just seems to be the cycle is broken. And when the ego gets involved, it's like there's some people's egos that are so big that they're not able to receive because it makes them feel like they owe something. If I receive this, or if I accept this invitation, then this person has a little bit of power over me because now I'm in debt. And I've learned that by overgiving. I've never consciously pushed away gifts. I've been receiving my whole life. Now, I just mentioned the shame associated with that and feeling like I hadn't earned it or wasn't, worthy of it. But there's also this like man-to-man friendship dynamics I've had where our relationship is harder the more generous I get. If I'm like, hey, can I grab you something? Or I bring you I bring you a gift just out of nowhere, or if I'm the one calling, apparently it makes some guys feel like, oh, now like they're in debt, and no one wants to feel like they're in debt. And I guess you can question the intentions of my giving, but there's been times where I've genuinely felt like I'm just giving because I have. And if this helps me sometimes. If I need to approach something, we can approach anything as being selfish, right? So maybe a Christian gives to get to heaven, Or maybe a Buddhist or Hindu gives to build their karma because they know that it'll return. And that's kind of how I think about it. It's like, I don't tend to hold on to cash or money as much as I used to kind of just be a squirrel and save. But I'm putting my money out there with a little mental note, may this return to me 7 times. Or yeah, I say that, but I kind of like put money out there just because I know money's like water. Like it's collected on the banks. It's collected in the banks. Cash flow. You liquidate your assets when you want to create cash flow. There's some other cool water references as they relate to money. But the concept is like money is cyclical and it flows. So sometimes I do give, not to receive even from that person, but like I put things out there and have faith that they will return to me in some way, somehow. So in that way, it's selfish. In a lot of ways, it pays to be good. Like in business, one of the most selfish things you can do is be a trustworthy, good business partner. Because in the long run, especially if you're building a long-term relationship, you're not just trying to make a quick buck. That's going to pay back tremendously. I'm still waiting on that. I felt like I've upheld, and I'm young, so it's kind of been. I'm a young millennial, so our ethics are pretty good. Our awareness, our global awareness, is better than any generation. Maybe besides the one just above us and the one just below us. But if I may, I think there's just a certain global awareness, internet, that's present in millennials, which gives us the capacity for empathy, deeper amounts of empathy. But I like this concept. I practice and I upkeep integrity and ethics in business particularly because I am forethinking enough to know that it's going to come back or that I may need this relationship in the future in ways that I can't see. Paying people back on time, responding as soon as possible. Again, even if there's no visible gain in sight. And I don't honestly feel like it's coming back yet. I'm still very much, I think I have 6 teachers right now. I have 3 music teachers, guitar, drums, and then a vocal, guitar, and drum kind of teacher. I have 2 trainers, 2 movement trainers. And I think I'm missing. Oh, and I'm looking to hire a sound engineer for this podcast. Even though it's not creating it, and my point is I'm not seeing a bunch of money come back right now. I've invested into friends' businesses, hasn't created a return, at least financially at this point. But I have gained, I have received returns at various points in my life that have kept me well. I don't really want to talk about that, but my point is I kind of still do this with the faith. I kind of spend and give money and put money and energy into the community, and with the faith that it'll return to me somehow in a good way. Supporting people's music, buying their albums, etc. I don't let the money pool and become stagnant. There are some places where like cryptocurrency, I've pretty much been a hodler. I hold, and it's been fluctuating, but I wonder if I should create a little bit more current with that, liquidate some of those assets and put them into various places in the hopes of them returning to me. And some news on my sole goal, which is to bring the American buffalo bison back to the Great Plains, to restore the Great Plains, to heal the land, to stop desertification, the creation of deserts, and to heal the water, consequently. There's been some movement on that, and it's been since I've put that out there. I met a farmer. He has a farm called the Organic Compound in Minnesota, and he's reforesting a particular piece of land, raising chickens. Chickens are, he calls them jungle fowl. Like, they're not meant for open plains and open fields because that's where predators can pick them off. Hawks and eagles like to have a lot of space to dive and catch their prey. So having trees, they don't actually perch on trees and attack from there. They need more space. So chickens are more protected in like a reforested or a forested area. So he's reforesting some land in Minnesota and raising chickens that eat the insects and some feed, I suppose. And he's also growing nut trees that they can feed off of. And he invited me to this regenerative agriculture group on Facebook. And for whatever reason, the talk has been about bison, which is my particular area of interest. And it's been so informative. There's also an amazing TED Talk by Alan Savory, who his main mission is stop desertification, the deserting of the world, the erosion of topsoil. And oh man, he has a really powerful TED Talk, and he made the mistake. He's been a soil scientist for years, and they thought that herding animals, like elephants, he's from Africa, and they thought that the desertification of the land was largely due to grazing animals like elephants and cattle. So they ran a campaign and ended up killing 40,000 elephants, pachyderms, which he says is the greatest regret of his life, something that he'll die having regret. But there's one silver lining that came from it, and it was his undying, relentless effort to reforest and to replane and heal the land, which they found counterintuitively that bringing cattle, large herds of cattle, to a deserted area, a low grass to no grass area, through them stomping, pissing, and shitting on the soil, it reflourished once deserts to full-on valley, like grasslands and valleys, which is something I knew, but he explains it in such a way and uses images so well that is really eye-opening. He has an institute called the Savory Institute, and he's selling these regenerative agriculture courses on his site for, I think it's like $99 for 5 courses, or you can buy all of them for $400 or something, $399, $299, whatever it is. And I'm going to dive into those courses soon. That seems to be the next step, but the first step was, getting to the TED Talk, getting plugged into this regenerative agriculture group, and seeing some of the trials and tribulations of raising bison and cattle. And then they have beefalo, the hybrid of cows and bison, which tend to be a little more docile, because buffalo superiors is like they're wild. Like, I saw today on one of the threads, a guy's like, how do I get my male buffaloes to stop fighting each other? Because in my mind, I'm like, well, why do you have to do anything? Why can't you just let them do their thing? And he's like, because they're fighting. Some of them, they're fighting to the point of exhaustion or death. So like, it's lowering his income, his ability to produce value from them. But my mindset is a little different. I'm not trying to produce direct value from the buffalo that I'm trying to help bring back to the Great Plains. I want to create a wild buffalo population that can travel and restore land as it goes. They're migrating animals. They migrated almost coast to coast back before is it called genocide if it's not people? The extermination of the bison. That's more the mindset I have, and maybe that'll include some sort of fencing or some sort of zoning at first, but eventually I just want there to be a wild buffalo population, bison population, massive herds like there once was, restoring the land and therefore improving the water supply that we all enjoy so much. So the Savory Institute. That's my next step. I think this one's a little shorter, but it was a sweet one. Not a lot of humor, but I feel like this is as authentic as I can get. It's a lot of what's going through my mind today. And I'm glad that the words found me. And as always, I thank you so much for being a part of the show. And your presence is the most valuable thing, and it's something I appreciate the most. If you do find value above and beyond, I encourage you to support this podcast through Patreon or through OnlyFans, which the links will be provided in the comments below. And thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful, beautiful day. This is Niko, and this has been the Goodwind. Whew.